Dr. James Alexander is a professor of political science at the University of Pittsburgh, Johnstown. In a city that ranked as the largest steel producer in the country before the coming of Andrew Carnegie in Pittsburgh, Dr. Alexander found a little-known but very important fact. Johnstown made streetcar rails as well as entire rail systems for cities throughout the United States, Europe, and South America. The Johnson Company was, in fact, the leading installer of city transit systems in the country. He also found out that few people knew about it.
Well, when I first came to Johnstown, I was an urban specialist, and anyone who's interested in cities and the history of cities knows all about streetcars. And so I was familiar with streetcar history, the history of the technology of streetcars. Been on various streetcar systems in the United States and in Europe. And when I started poking around downtown, I discovered that one of the main producers of streetcar technology was actually right here in Johnstown. And that was at the same time that the Heritage Association was working with the America's Industrial Heritage Project to do a history of the Bethlehem steel mills, the iron mills and that kind of thing. I ended up talking to the project director informally on one occasion, and we were just chatting about various historical aspects. And I said, well, you do realize, of course, that over in the other part of town sits a steel fabricating mill that is probably just as significant in its field as Bethlehem was in its. And he was surprised. He just thought, as many people would, that steel is steel. And so therefore there was a steel industry here and it was all the same thing. I said, oh no, this was streetcar as opposed to railroad. And at that point, took him over. We did a brief walk around the plant so I could show him what was there. And at that point he said, can I get you to do a documentation? And that was the first project that I worked on with the Johnstown mill.
Over the years, Dr. Alexander was to undertake studies in many of the features that made Johnstown, Johnstown. The tragedy and triumph of the Great Flood, the industrial heritage, the place of Cambria City and its churches, schools, and people, and other features in the region. But Dr. Alexander has also played a significant role in bringing the many stories of Johnstown to younger generations of Johnstown residents who learn from his extraordinary sense of place that makes Johnstown's heritage a living laboratory for teachers and students.
In 1995, I moved to Johnstown, having never been to Western Pennsylvania, and the first person I met was Dr. Alexander. And I was interviewing for a job as a professor of history here, and he said to me, "You've picked a wonderful place. What do you know about Johnstown?" I said, "Well, I know a little about the Johnstown flood." And he says, "Well, there's a lot more to Johnstown than the Johnstown flood." And he sent me immediately with maps down into the city for a walking tour of Cambria City, of the city of Johnstown, to look around Moxham. And he said, "Come back tomorrow after you look around this place and tell me what you think about it." And when I came back to talk to him, he said, "It's kind of like a laboratory, isn't it?" And I learned right then that if I wanted to teach history in Johnstown, that I had to use the place.
The history of the town of Moxham actually goes in hand with the development of the mill, because the people who developed the mill, Tom Johnson, Arthur Moxham, and so forth, the people who developed the mill actually designed a town around the mill, laid it out, streets, blocks, and so forth, with the anticipation that the growing labor force that would be situated there would be very close to the mill, and that the workers could own their own properties. It was not a company town in that sense. A number of the buildings in Moxham, including probably 10 or 15 existing homes, date back to that period. And some of those historic homes are in marvelous shape.
Dr. Alexander's work on documenting the worldwide importance of the Johnson Company in the design, fabrication, and installation of entire transit systems resulted in him gaining access to the company's vault. And in that vault, he found logs of orders placed with the company by major cities in the United States and abroad.
This is a project, when Jim began it, that people might have known the name of Moxham and Arthur Moxham, but they probably didn't know about the Johnson Rail. This is something that was unknown. The Johnson rail was such a unique invention that the company here really provided some amazingly high percentage of all the streetcar rails in America, and many of them exported to places like Australia, other parts of the world.
Dr. Alexander's impact on this place goes far beyond the important studies he has contributed. It goes to the very core of what makes this place so special and unique.
Much of my teaching, being experiential teaching, has come from his mentorship and discussions that we have almost on a daily basis about places and about people in these places and their history. And it's interesting because Dr. Alexander is a political science professor whose interests range from industrial history to copyright law and so on and so forth, and constitutional law, but he's grounded in place. And he's always able to discuss with me and to point out to me new places and new things about old places that I can use in my teaching, and then immediately encourages me to use them.
Finally, what Dr. James Alexander brings to his teaching, research, and writing not only preserves the past, but stimulates the teachers, students, visitors, and residents to emulate his passion.
Jim is a courageous scholar, and he is just characterized by truthfulness. So when he gets an idea and he researches it, he will follow that research track wherever it leads him. He wants to know the truth, and he won't give up until he finds it.